Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Appreciate it. So yeah, as Katie mentioned, I'm from Finovate. We're a demo-first showcase of new innovations in financial and banking technology. And this is my office. This is where I was 1 week ago. This is what the stage looks like at Finovate. Now, you don't have to be presenting on a huge stage like this, but at some point in the life of your startup, you will find yourself in a room full of people with a very simple task: make them care about you. That is, no matter if it's 2 people in a boardroom, 100 people in an audience like this, 500 people in the picture that you see there, you have to be able to get up on stage and advocate for yourself in a way that advances your strategic interests. Now, I know this is a prospect that can be terrifying to a lot of people. The good news is, you don't have to be an excellent public speaker. You don't have to be a natural. You don't even have to like it very much in order to be able to do a demo or a pitch that advances your strategic interests. And that's what we're going to be talking about over the course of the next hour. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So this looks impressive. This looks cool. But it all actually starts right here. And this is where most of us feel a little bit more comfortable, especially in the fintech space. Nobody got into fintech because they liked talking to people. They like being at their computers, right? And all of a sudden you find yourself up there on stage. The good news is that you can employ a lot of strategies that break down the process and make it substantially easier to do a good job up there on the main stage. So it starts here. It starts with a pen, a piece of paper, a notebook, and from there, you want to think about a couple of key questions. Before you even really get started, you want to think about strategically, what am I trying to do here? Who am I trying to reach? What do I want that person to remember? What do I want that person to do? And most importantly, why should they care? One of the biggest mistakes I see companies who come on our stage make is that they approach it from the standpoint of, here's what I want to show you. You want to flip that. It should be about, here's what you need to know from me. I always want to have my audience at the center of my thinking as a part of this process. And I want to be thinking about this big question: why should you care about what I have to talk to you about? Well, here's a little thought exercise. It all starts with a relatively simple thing, and I always recommend this to every company who's been on our stage at Finovate. Start by thinking about, what are the most important things for the audience to take away? And a really good thought exercise for this is, imagine the person that you're most interested in connecting with, that kind of ideal attendee. In any audience, there's different groups of people, and in that audience, there are always a couple of people that are most important to you. What do you want that person to remember about you? Imagine that person at the end of your demo, at the end of your pitch, writes down 3 bullet points, and that's it. That's the sum total of what they will remember about you at the end of your talk. In their perfect world, what do those 3 bullet points say? If you can't answer that question before you get up on stage, your audience is not going to be able to take away those big picture pieces. And I hear what you're thinking right now, because surely, I've got 7 minutes, I've got 10 minutes, I've got 15 minutes. I can think about more than 3 things, right? Sorry. You really can't. The honest truth is that human beings are terrible at listening comprehension. It takes us multiple opportunities to absorb even basic messages. And so focusing in on 3 core things for yourself will give your demo or your pitch focus. It gives it clarity and makes it extremely more likely that the audience will take away those pieces that you want them to take away. So once you go through this exercise, you come out with this universe of all of the different pieces you could know about us. And this takes a while, by the way. This is some of the most important time you'll spend in the entire scripting process. You will start out with maybe 10 ideas on the whiteboard. These are all things that people could know about us. Now I have to narrow down. I have to prioritize. I have to get to a point where I just have 3 things. And these become the core messages of your demo. That's it. These are the pieces that you want to make sure everybody remembers. You build your entire demo or your pitch around the pieces that you've already decided are the most important pieces for the audience to know about you. This is where that strategic piece comes in. So far, we haven't talked at all about actually getting up on stage or dealing with the nerves that come from that, but you start with a really clear vision of here's what I'm trying to accomplish, here's who I want to reach, here's what I want them to remember, and now I have these core messages, beer and lobster. Enough said. If you remember nothing else about this restaurant, you'll remember that they have beer and lobster, and quite frankly, what more do you need to know? That's exactly a great example of what this looks like in practice. Now, the difference, of course, being this is a sign. They have a limited amount of time to get your attention. On stage, you have more time to get the audience's attention, right? And again, not really. The first 30 seconds, the first 60 seconds of your talk, the audience is deciding whether or not they want to listen to you for the rest of your time on stage. And if you don't go out and grab them in that first 30 to 60 seconds, phone's going to come out of pockets, people are going to start checking emails, trying to figure out Wordle for the day or whatever. But it's really important that you come into in the first 30 seconds, I need to be able to say, here is what you can expect by listening to me. Here's how you will benefit by listening to what I have to tell you. So now we move on to an outline. You've set your core messages. You have a good idea of what your strategic goals are. There's 3 basics of public speaking, and I certainly didn't invent this. This is tried and true. This goes back to the days of Abraham Lincoln, JFK, Martin Luther King. Great speakers throughout history have employed this technique. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. Again, I didn't invent this, but it sure is fun to say. This kind of repetition is built in there. And again, you're thinking to yourself, but I don't want to be repetitive in my time on stage. You actually really do. You need the audience to have multiple opportunities to absorb those high-level messages, those big picture takeaways that you've decided are the most important. So roughly speaking, this outline basics kind of turns into something like this. And you see, this is my super cool, obviously very high-tech breakdown of what a demo outline or a pitch outline looks like. I've got the purple message up there for high-level messages, the blue level for low-level messages, and you can see that, broadly speaking, we've got a big chunk at the beginning, all high-level messages, a big chunk at the end, all high-level messages. That's your introduction at the top, that's your conclusion at the bottom, and then in between you've got the body of the presentation. And you structure this in many ways the same way you would a research paper or something else. Many of us are more comfortable with the idea of putting together a longer written paper, and you use the exact same format. You have a thesis statement. I'm going to prove to you that this thesis statement is true over the course of this paper. Then I submit my evidence, validating, yes, this is true. And at the end, I come to the conclusion, hey, I just proved to you that my thesis is correct. And the same basic idea plays very well in the public speaking arena. So you think, broadly speaking, I've got my introduction, I've got my conclusion, and then in between, I'm going to show you some things where we get a little bit of a deeper dive into the technology or the product that I want you to be aware of. That's where those low-level messages come in. A really important piece here, every piece of blue that you've got there, every low-level message that you've got, you want to follow it up with a high-level message at the end. Here's why I showed you that. Here's a mini conclusion for you. If one of my core messages is that my product will save your company a lot of money, as I go through and I show an aspect of the technology that really gets to that point, I want to finish that by saying, hey, that's where that money saving comes in. I just showed you where that money saving piece is. 5 seconds, 10 seconds is all that it takes to make sure that the audience doesn't forget that big picture goal, that really important question that's deeper than how the technology works, how the product works. This important question is, why does it matter whether it works or not? At every point throughout my presentation, I need to continuously pop back up to that high level and say, here's why that matters. Well, I just showed you this. Here's what you should take away from it. Next, I'm going to show you this. Here's what you should take away from that. And again, all of this needs to be lined up with your high level, the core messages that you set at the very beginning. Those need to be, they need to permeate the entire presentation so that the audience never is able to forget them. And you would be amazed at how fast they can forget things. By the time you get to minute 4 of your pitch, the audience will have forgotten most of what you said in minute 1. That's the reality. You have to continue to remind them. And it doesn't have to be the exact same language every time, but you need to keep coming back to this high-level message and make it clear, hey, I'm going to save you money. Hey, I'm going to save you time. And as I show you the process, I never let you forget those 2 important pieces. So once I get to this stage, then the task is relatively straightforward. I turn the outline into a script, and I've got, again, my super high-end clip art, which I put together. But this is just basically that visualization what you just had, kind of stacked line by line. Now, you might have 5 minutes, you might have 7 minutes, you might have 15 minutes. This same basic principle works no matter what length of presentation that you have, but you've got this kind of general pattern of high-level messages on the bookends, and then we repeat low-level, high-level, low-level, high-level. There are different ways that this can look depending on exactly what you have to show. In some cases, you will have more pieces to show. You'll have more time, so you can show more things, more aspects of your product or your technology. And in that case, you go through this process a little bit more quickly. You have a different cycle speed. The one in the middle is a really interesting one as well. You see, we're kind of taking a break there for some high-level messaging. One of the biggest questions that I get when people say, if you've only got 45 seconds, call it, for an introduction, what do I do with the background information on my company? I want people to know who we are and where we're coming from, but at the same time, I don't want people to get sidetracked there because the most important thing isn't really our background, but it's what we can do for you. Here's an example of how that can look, where you kind of go out there, you get the audience's attention, you show them a little bit about it. Once you've done that, you've kind of captured their attention, they've bought in. At that point, you can take a step back and go through some background information. You don't have to, but that option exists for you there, and you'll find that people are much more receptive to this background information about yourself and your company after they've already decided, this person has something they can offer me. I should pay attention to them. So the first goal, get that attention, and then once you've got it, you can start to use it in different areas. You can employ it in other directions. So again, there's a wide variety of different shapes this can take, but at a really high level, this is a quick visualization of what a demo script or a pitch script can actually look like. Now we've got our messaging, we've got an idea of what we want the audience to take away. Now, only at this point is it time to start thinking about the visual elements of your pitch. This can be a demo, it can be a slide deck. A lot of people approach this backwards. You think about, here's the visuals that I want. I want to show my slide deck, and then I want to make my script match my slide deck. That's actually backwards. You always want to put together the visuals after you've set the messages, because the visuals are there for one reason only, and that's to support the high-level messages that you have. So how can you have the visuals that you know before you actually have that messaging down? This is one of the, again, common pitfalls that I see people fall into. You want to make sure you know exactly strategically what you're looking to do, and then you choose visuals which will underline and emphasize that side of it. So when adding visual elements, there are a couple big pieces to keep in mind. I call them key concepts. The first key concept, and the most important one, the audience can only look at one thing at a time. If you're looking at that slide right there, you're not looking at me. And if you're looking at the slide and really reading something on the slide, you're certainly not listening to me. At any given point, the audience is always focusing on one thing, and how do you, as a speaker, make sure that they're focusing on the right thing? The answer is hold their hand. And I don't mean literally, but I mean in the course of a script, direct their attention towards where you want it to be. You have the power up there on stage to focus the audience in a way that's really unique. And so if you want them looking at the screen and really engaging with something that's on your slide or your demo, then everything in your script should be pushing them back to the screen. Look at this slide, look at this demo, and it makes it very clear for the audience, I want your attention on the visual side of it. If I want your attention on myself as a speaker, my screen needs to be resting. I can't have activity over there if I want you really focusing in on myself. So when you think about those purple patches, those high-level messages in the script, during each of those moments, your screen should be resting. The last thing you want to do is have a distraction that's up there that pulls the audience away from the moment where you're telling them that most important thing, that thing you've decided is the most important thing. So hold their hand, tell them where you want their attention, and if you're doing a product demo or there's something that you have a more complicated screen to show them, you need to even go a step further and look at which pieces of the screen do I want your attention to be on. I want you focusing on this left-hand column over here because that's where the action's going to be. Look at there's third option down. I'm clicking on this third option. This really basic, granular level of play-by-play exposition is vital for a product demo. It's also extremely important with a PowerPoint presentation as well. Tell the audience where you want their attention to be. Grab them by the hand. Make sure they don't wander off, because they will. They will try to, but you can get them by the hand and say, here's where your attention should be. The next key concept when thinking about your visual elements, simplicity is very important, especially when you're talking about a slideshow. Now, if you're demonstrating a product, in some cases that product can be really complicated. You have some more complicated screens that you have to walk the audience through. In that case, you have to show it in all its complex glory. But as much as possible, you want to break it down into something that's really easy, really bite-sized for the audience to understand. Now, my wife works in education, and I get a lot of terrible, terrible slides from her. And before any of us laughs too hard at those fools in education, I've seen worse slides in fintech. I just don't put them up because I don't want to embarrass people that I know. But this is an example of a slide which is impossible. How could anybody read that? And if you were going to read that, you certainly wouldn't be listening to anything I said for the, 2 or 3 minutes it would take you to get through that. But this is the kind of slide deck that people continuously present. Or here's another one, a baker's dozen questions we should ask before we move deeply into student-centered instruction. Even saying that was complicated. And now I've got 13 more things down there. And let's not even talk about the formatting in the 13th point, because that is the kind of thing that really drives me crazy. But has anybody even bothered to read this? Has anybody made it through 4 or 5 at this point? And this is about how long you would normally spend on a slide in a presentation. Impossible. Another one, this is my favorite, we see this all the time in the financial technology space, these really complex graphs. I want just to marvel the arrows. Just look at the arrows on this slide and think about how many different things are clearly interrelated with each other, how many things, somebody spent a ridiculous amount of time putting this together, and I've had this slide in my deck for 18 months now. I'm still not positive what they were going for. So this is an example of going way too far, putting too much detail into the slides. You can't possibly present a slide like this. So you never want to give yourself this impossible task. Simple slides are better. And did you know that when you present, slides are free? They cost you nothing. You can just keep adding them. More simple slides is way better than one super complex slide. So that takes us to our next key concept. You cannot present a slide deck that somebody is meant to read. If you're out there pitching your company to venture capitalists, you have a slide deck that you hope that they read, you hope that they can get it, you can get it in front of them. This says everything about who we are as a company. That is a terrific asset for you to have. You should absolutely spend a huge amount of time on creating that asset because it's vital for you, but you cannot present it in this kind of context because it's not meant to be presented, it's meant to be read. Here's an example of a slide which would look great in a presentation that you hope somebody reads. I've got some information about my key founders, obviously fictionalized in case that wasn't clear, but this is something which, again, if I'm presenting this, you would have a tough time taking much away about Mary Smith or Corey Jones in this context, even though these are important things for you to know. So when you look at a visual presentation, you want to change it up. I don't need the text, I need the images. I want you to associate Mary Smith with McKinsey & Company and Harvard Business School and eBay and SkyTap. This is where I can create a visual image which supports what I'm saying. It's not redundant too. I'm not reading the slide. I'm putting this image in your head to reinforce the pieces that I'm saying so that when you think about my team, you have someone there, oh wait, they're the ones who went to Harvard Business School, right? Because you make this connection. And so this is a perfect example of where you can get into trouble if you present a slide deck that's meant to be read. Now, obviously, ideally you have both, right? And at Finovate, you have 7 minutes on stage to try and capture the audience's attention. What you're hoping is that somebody after that 7 minutes comes back and says, hey, I want to learn more about you. At that point, slide them the real deck. Give them the robust deck that has all of the information. At that point, they're interested, they're engaged, they're ready to receive that information. They're not ready in the context of somebody sitting in an audience and waiting for you to wow them, basically. So, as we think about all of these visuals, you come to a point where you get to this question of decision making. what do I put in the pitch and what stays out? This is a really crucial process because all of us want to show everything that we can do, right? You have this instinct, I have a limited amount of time on stage. It's important for me that you understand exactly what I can do at a granular level, but you don't have time for that. And that's okay. What you want to do is hold every possible thing you could talk about, every possible thing you could show up against this measuring stick, which is, does this support my core message? If I put this low-level blue piece in here, which of my core messages am I going to tie that to at the end? And if you can't tie something to your high-level message, it shouldn't be in your presentation. It should be very simple for you to make this connection between everything that you show and what your high-level takeaway is. If you struggle at that step, it's a huge red flag that you should pay attention to because it means either that's something that you don't need to be showing, or your core message, your high-level message is not doing exactly what you need it to do. If you get to this point in the process and think, wait a minute, I really wanted to show X, but that doesn't lead up to my core message, then you think, well, either X is wrong or that core message is wrong, and I need to take some time. I need to take a big step back and think, hold on, let's go back up to that strategic level. What are we really trying to do here? So as you think about your decision-making, hold it up to that rubric. Here is why it matters. Here's how I tie it to my high-level message. You do not have time for everything, and that's okay. You don't need to say everything, especially in a limited pitch kind of environment where you've got 5 minutes, you've got 7 minutes. You need to get their attention, you need to get that next meeting, and then when you can take 30 minutes or an hour, you can walk somebody through things in more detail. That's the place where you really go granular. When you're up on stage trying to win somebody's attention, trying to make them care, you're going to give them only the best stuff. The good stuff, unfortunately, has to be left out. But if you go through it in this way, the pieces that are left in the demo or in the pitch will be the pieces that you've decided are the most strategically advantageous for yourself. The pieces that you've gone through this process and said, again, if you only remember 3 things about me, these are the right 3 things to remember about me. And in that context, everything I show you should guide you toward those 3 pieces. And if I can come out of this process with a script where I feel confident and people in my organization feel confident that if you walk away from the script with these 3 things, that's a win for us. That confidence is worth a huge amount as you start to think about actually getting up on stage and actually delivering it. Knowing that you've put together a demo or a pitch script that advances those strategic interests is incredibly valuable. And this is, again, an area where so far we haven't talked about getting on stage at all. We've talked about setting yourself up to win by doing this back-end work, the strategic work, giving yourself this opportunity to get your messages across to the audience. So whatever that looks like for you, whatever those messages are, and by the way, I would encourage you to try out different messages as you have different speaking engagements. Different audiences will have different messages. If you're talking to a group of people who will end up being in an audience that you're presenting to later on, focus group your messages, find out what works. The more strategic you can make this, the easier the entire process is, and the easier it is to approach the entire thing with confidence. So now, all that talk about confidence notwithstanding, let's talk about common pitfalls. And believe me, I've seen a ridiculous number of them over the course of my time at Finovate. The first common pitfall I call the innovator's blind spot. And this happens when you, as an innovator or as somebody with a new company, you're so close to your own product, to your own technology, that you find it difficult to put yourself in the position of somebody who's seeing you for the first time, hearing about you for the first time. And the natural tendency is, I want to tell you about the most recent feature that I added because I just built it and I'm proud of it and I want you to know about it. But that's not going to help the audience. The audience needs to zoom way back to where you were at the start. What made you create that technology in the first place? What was the hole you saw? The part of the ecosystem that was lacking something? Where was that big picture opportunity? It's very easy to zoom right past that as you start to show and tell people about your product. And this is a huge blind spot. And there's a couple of different ways that it manifests. There's a high side and a low side. On the high level, this is leaving a major benefit unstated because it's so obvious to you. You think, well, of course, if I tell you I can speed this process up by 50%, you'll recognize that that's a significant cost savings for your organization. Maybe. The audience might remember that. But it's still really valuable for you to say, oh, this is huge cost savings. If there's a huge benefit, don't assume the audience will understand it. Make that really explicit. Call it out. This is your chance to fly your flag. You should be proud of what you built up there on stage. Don't leave anything to chance. If there's a major benefit, make sure that you call that out. On a low level, this is simply going too quickly through the demo, through the slide deck, because it's so clear to you. You've spent a lot of time working with this technology or working with the slide deck. It's all very obvious to you. It can be difficult to put yourself in the position of somebody who's seeing you for the first time, but the honest truth is that person will need you to go slower. They'll need you to take a little bit more time. You have to approach it like you would a kindergartner almost. Hey, I'm going to show you this demo. Don't worry, we're going to go at a nice, easy pace. We're going to keep it very accessible to you. I don't want to assume any technical expertise on your part. I don't want to assume even business model expertise on your part. I want to make it really clear this is where your attention should be. Again, holding their hand, look at, this is the screen, this is where I want your attention. I'm clicking here because I'm pulling up X screen. I'm looking at this graph now. The graph is going up. That's good. This really, really basic play-by-play, this exposition is so important at keeping the audience with you as you go through everything that you want to show them. The next big picture pitfall that I see people fall into is this time wasting level. So here's a little diagram. Again, we've got kind of the high level messages at the top. We've got the low level messages at the bottom. In between, I think it's the canopy. Who knows about forests? I think it's the canopy level that is a time wasting level. It's where you can spend a huge amount of time and not actually get anything back from it. You, at any given moment during your presentation, you want to either be advancing the audience's understanding of how it works or why it matters that it works, low level or high level. Anything in between those two, you can have a lot of pretty words, but the audience won't end up remembering any of them. So at any given moment in your presentation, in your script, be thinking to myself, am I high level right now or am I low level? If I'm high level, have I gone high level enough? Have I really found where that big picture benefit comes from? Have I taken it to the point where it's so obvious that the audience would say, of course I want that thing. Of course I want to save money. Of course I want new revenue opportunities. If it's low level, have I gone low level enough? Am I making it accessible for people who are seeing me for the first time? Is there enough explanatory text in my script that makes it clear this is what you should be taking away? Here's how this works. Again, two questions that matter: how it works, why it matters that it works. Everything else is a waste of time. The third common pitfall, speaking how you write. I love this comic. I have no idea who made this, but I see this all the time up on the Finovate stage. When you get into a moment where you have to present to a group of people, there's this natural inclination to think, I want to prove to them that I'm smart. We all want to prove to the audience that we're smart, and a lot of people do that by using complicated language, by demonstrating, yes, I have control over these buzzwords. I can make you understand how this works. It's really important that when you get up there on stage that you speak in a way that makes it easy for the audience to listen to you. This is not copy that's meant to be read. It's not something that's going on your webpage or in a press release. It's a script that you're going to actually present. As you write your script, read it out loud to yourself. Make sure that it's easy for you to say the words that are on the page. If you struggle to read it the first time through, the audience will struggle to hear it their first time through. And they only get one shot at it. You have a lot of times that you can rehearse it. The audience has one chance to take away what you want them to. Make that language accessible. Make it easy. There's no prizes awarded for vocabulary. The only prize that is awarded is getting the audience to understand what you're trying to tell them. Another good rule, you cannot speak a semicolon. If you have a complicated sentence, break it into multiple sentences. Shorter sentences are better. That's not to say that you need to shy away from complex ideas. Of course, you have complex ideas that you need to get across. But if you want to be successful, give them to the audience in a very easy to understand way. The best demos that I've seen on stage at Finovate are the ones that are able to take really complex technologies, complex ideas, and make them seem very simple, very easy to understand, and leave everybody in the audience thinking, oh, I want to learn more about how exactly they do that, because that sounded really interesting. That's where you want to be at the end of your presentation, having an audience say, I want to follow up with him. I want to learn more. I think they might be something that they can offer to me. If you can leave your audience wanting more, this is where it's a terrific spot at the end of your presentation, because really what you're trying to do up on stage, the ultimate goal is finding a next conversation. It's getting somebody to come back to your booth, to email you, whatever type of inbound interest you're looking for. The point of a pitch in front of people is just to get them interested in learning more and wanting to set up that meeting. Then you can come back into this comfort zone. I can get you one-on-one for 30 minutes, for 60 minutes. I can walk through everything again. And people love that opportunity. You have to get that. You have to earn that opportunity by intriguing them from stage. So, another really important piece that we haven't talked about at all is creating a meaningful connection with the audience. And this is actually a really important aspect of a demo or any kind of a pitch, understanding the people who are standing in front of you, what their needs are, what they stand to benefit by you coming and talking to them. This is obviously important for you to know, but it's also really important that you understand your own strengths. And now I've talked a lot about these high-level best practices of putting a pitch together. There's a huge amount of room in that format for you to add your own personality. There's a lot of decisions and different things that you could weigh against each other. You could use humor. You might not be as comfortable with humor. You might not want to. You could have multiple people presenting something, getting a little interpersonal play up on stage. You can use different visual elements. You can have all these different ideas for how you can structure a compelling pitch. And if anybody is interested, by the way, go to finovate.com and look at the demo videos that we have up there. And if you can look by show, you can see which ones have a little trophy icon next to them. They have won Best of Show. One of the winners, by the way, is sitting right here. Susan Langer from Spave won Best of Show at Finovate Spring earlier this year. And you watch her video, watch all of those demo videos, and you'll get a sense of how many different styles there are, how many different ways there are to be effective in this space. And you have to look at yourself and think, what do I want to be? What's my own style? I need to be comfortable up there in order to create a meaningful connection with you as an audience. If I'm trying to adopt a persona that is not myself, if I'm trying to do, I saw Steve Jobs do this presentation technique, so I'm going to do what Steve Jobs did. People are going to smell you out. They're going to say, that's not him. That's not the person who's up there. That's somebody, he's adopting somebody else. Something feels fishy about this. The audience always knows if you're in a position where you're trying to do something because somebody else did it and you thought it looked cool. Do it yourself. Be yourself up there on stage. It's such an important piece, an important aspect of all of this. So as you think about coming all the way back to the beginning, what are my high-level messages? What do I want the audience to take away? What do I want them to remember about me? What do I want them to do at the end of my presentation? Think about, what do I want myself to be? How do I want them to think of me? What's my comfort zone here? What's my public persona? This is an incredibly important aspect of everything that we're talking about here. And so, I think this is one of those areas where people, again, we almost get in our own way when it comes to getting up on stage. You get overawed. You think, I need to be somebody else. I'm not a performer by nature. I need to adopt elements of somebody else's persona in order to succeed here. You absolutely do not. You absolutely do not. You need to be your most authentic self. You need to be a strategic version of yourself, a person of yourself that has gone through this filtering process of, here's the 10 things I like about myself. Well, here's the top 3. But you need to be yourself first and foremost. That is ultimately what the audience will respond to. And again, they're just human beings like you are. They want you to succeed. They want you to have something to offer them, and they want to know what that is. The more you can approach it from this strategic standpoint, the easier it's going to be to do a really good job. So now, as we get to the next part of this, you've got a script ready, you've got an idea, here's what I want to show you. When it comes time to actually start to put together your performance, you take the script out of this theoretical document, here's what I want to say, here's what I want to show, and it ultimately turns into something where you're actually standing in front of a group of people and putting it together. There are a few really important things to keep in mind as you go through that process. The first is a very simple one: practice, practice, practice. You have to practice every aspect of your pitch or your demo over and over and over again. I've seen people who are extremely intelligent people who I know have really good technology. I see them backstage at Finovate. I say, what are you going to talk about? And they say, oh, I'm just going to go out there and wing it. I know my product. I know what I can do. And they get up there, and we have a very firm 7-minute deadline at our show. There's a bell that rings at 7 minutes, and you're donezo. And these are the people who get gonged. These are the people who are halfway through their pitch, the bell goes off, and they haven't even talked about their high-level message yet because they didn't practice it. They knew the messages, they knew what they wanted to say, but they had no idea what their timing was going to be like when they actually started speaking it. So as you get your script together, you take it to this next step, practice it, understand how long each segment takes you. Again, you can systemize this. You can have different bits. I do this. I have different bits. Even in this own talk, I know if I talk about X, it's going to take me 3 minutes. I've rehearsed it. I've done that before. And I look at my total amount of time, and I think, OK, how much time do I have here? Well, I can break this down. I've got this 3-minute bit, this 2-minute bit, here's a 5-minute bit. And I know how long each of these sections are going to take. You need to be there as well so that if you end up in a situation where you have a 5-minute pitch, you have a good idea of how to approach that. If you have a 10-minute pitch, I can add in more pieces. I know how long each element takes, and so I can deliver it in the way that I want to. As you practice, there's a really important piece to keep in mind as well. Every single time you say it to yourself, in the hotel room, in front of the mirror, whatever the case may be, every single time you go through your script, you want to deliver it in the way that you want to do it up on stage. And the reason for that is simple. Every time you read it, you're building a muscle memory. Your brain is getting used to hearing it a certain way. Your mouth is getting used to saying it a certain way. And if you think, I'm going to read it for timing, I'm just going to read it for memorization, I'll add the inflection, I'll add the life in later on, it's incredibly difficult to do that. Better to build that correct muscle memory from the very beginning so that by the time you get to the point where you're on stage, you've only ever said it one way. You've only ever heard it one way. Because guess what? When you get up on stage, you're going to get this shot of adrenaline. It's a terrific feeling. It's awesome. You guys are going to love it. But it's really important that you have this muscle memory to fall back on because for the first 60 seconds of your own talk, there's a good chance you'll be somewhat in awe of the occasion yourself. And the only way you can ride through that adrenaline rush is to have this muscle memory where you can almost run on autopilot. I've had people come backstage after demoing at Finovate and they say, how was the first 2 minutes? Because I don't remember any of it. And they did great because their brain was just running, right? They'd rehearsed it so many times, it was easy for them to get up there and they could almost just like, poof, and their brain's like, don't worry, I got you. We've said this 1,000,000 times. I can say it one more time, just how I've always said it. This rehearsal is key. Making sure you do practice is key. Building the right practice is key. Practice makes perfect. Not quite right to me. Practice makes permanent. However you practice it the most times is how you're going to do it when it really matters. So build it in from the very beginning. Give yourself time to rehearse it. Give yourself time to videotape yourself and watch it. Now that sucks, by the way. Watching yourself give a demo is nobody's idea of a good time, but it's super, super valuable. You have to do it. You have to be able to watch yourself in case, you might not even know. What if you're doing something like every 3 minutes, your hand in the pocket, and then it comes out, and then hand goes in the pocket again, and comes out, and then hand goes in the pocket again. You could do that completely unconsciously, and by the end of the presentation, the audience is like, I wonder if his hand's going to go in the pocket again. They've lost sight of everything that you were going to say because they get caught up in some minute aspect of some bizarre thing that you're doing up on stage without even realizing it. This is true, by the way. My high school principal, every single time he would lecture us in front of the entire school, we had a microphone on a stand, and you could time it, and I did time it because I was a little bit of a great student. He would reach out, hand would go in the pocket, he would jingle his keys, and then he would tighten the microphone, and then the hand would go back in the pocket, and then he would tighten the microphone. And we're talking like a 10-minute presentation. He would tighten the microphone 6 or 7 times. And by the end of it, nobody in the audience was listening to what he was saying at all. We were taking bets on how many times he was going to tighten the microphone. This is exactly the kind of thing, if at any point somebody had put a camera on him and just said, hey, Principal Buckner, do you know that you do this? And nobody ever did, and we certainly didn't. So I actually do feel guilty about that to this day. Somebody should have given him a heads up. But that's the kind of thing that you're looking for when you are giving a presentation, when you videotape yourself. And you obviously also want to pay attention to, are these pieces coming through? Do I understand what I'm saying here? Is my pacing good? Is my inflection good? Am I delivering the performance that I want to deliver? But if you don't know that you're not doing something like that, especially if you're a nervous speaker, there's a high likelihood that you could accidentally fall into that kind of a trap. So videotape yourself, watch it in a dark room where nobody else can see you, hide your shame, but it will be so, so valuable for you when you actually get up there. And then when it comes time to actually getting up on the stage and presenting it, this is obviously where the rubber meets the road. Now, by this point, here's where those nerves really can start to come in. When that happens, you want to lean on the work that you've already done, the knowledge that you have put together a presentation which advances your strategic interests, where the language has been well thought out, the visuals have been well thought out. If you can come into this moment and know that the piece that you've put together looks good when you've done it yourself, that it's easy for somebody to understand who hasn't seen it before, that you have all of your strategic interests really expertly crossed off, that is how you survive the nerves. There's only one cure, and it's preparation. The good news is that everybody who starts a company that I've ever met is extremely dedicated, extremely good at putting that preparation in. And so when you get to that point on stage, you can actually relax, because you can lean on this idea that I've done what I need to do. I've done the hard part. I know what I'm going to say. My brain is used to saying it. My mouth is used to saying it. I've strategically thought of all these pieces. I put them together, and now I can get out on stage and actually have a little bit of fun with it. You might not be a natural performer. You might not be super comfortable up there, but if you have all of that prep work done, you just follow your script. You rely on that muscle memory, and you take it through. A couple of just quick pieces. When you actually get up in front of somebody, the way that you stand is really important. You want to set your feet. You want to make sure that the audience isn't distracted by movement or things like that. You know, if you kind of pace across the stage, you never know what you might find. Ooh, I didn't like that. Nice creaky thing there. The more you can stay set, the easier it's going to be for you to look like you're 100% in control of your own presentation. You eliminate any hint of nervous energy. Your feet are stationary. Your gestures come from your arms only, from your hips. You can rotate here. But in general, I want to eliminate as much unnecessary movement as I can. Because again, I want your focus on me. I want you to be hearing what I'm saying. I want to eliminate anything that could potentially pull focus from that aspect of things. So as you get up there, and the more you do this, the easier it gets. But it's really important, again, that you think to yourself, I'm just going to set my feet. I'm not going to do anything with my... People ask me, what should I do with my hands? What do you normally do with your hands? You just leave, they're part of it. If it's more comfortable, you can put a hand in a pocket and just kind of leave it there. But in general, the less movement you have, the easier it's going to be for the audience to absorb that message. So at this point, all you really can do is get your message out there. It's really important that you appear as though you care up there on stage. This is one of those things you want to add. If you're up on stage, you want to always be demonstrating that I believe in what I'm telling you. I believe in my own product. If I'm up on stage and I don't appear to care about it, why would anybody else care about it? This is a way that you can show that you have confidence in what you're doing. You can be justifiably proud of what you've put together, because you should be proud. When you've got a new product or a new idea, you want to get the word out. You want to fly that flag. This is your chance to do that in a really confident and comfortable way. So at this point, I'm going to open it up and see if there are any questions from anybody in the room. Sometimes it can be helpful to talk through specific elements. Does anybody have any questions? I know there's an online chat as well that questions could potentially come in through. So does anybody have any specific ideas or questions that they wanted to get an answer on?
Great presentation. Thank you very much. You mentioned the 3 things that you want the audience to take away. What are the 3 things that you wanted the audience to take away from your presentation today?
That's a great question. Well, the 3 things is one of them, so that's one of the most important ones. The first one is, yes, set your core messages, identify those 3 things. The second one I would say would be you can do this in a way that strategizes the entire process, that takes it from something which is this big black box, this, oh my God, I have to give a presentation, down to a step-by-step, systemizable way to do things. And honestly, I went with just 2 for this one because I know it's a lot to take in. Even with about 45 minutes here, those are really the most important ones for me. It's a little bit different though when you're kind of imparting wisdom than when you're pitching a specific product. So if I was gonna do kind of the 3 things for my own company, for Finovate, I would say it's fast moving, it's a high impact networking opportunity, and it's a demo first showcase. Those would be the 3 big things that I would say about my own company if I was pitching it to somebody else in a moment where I had only 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 5 minutes and someone said, what is Finovate all about? Why should I care about it? That's where I would end up in that conversation. And again, that's a message which can take 30 seconds. I can stretch it out to 5 minutes and add a little bit of elements to it. But those are the most important 3 things when I talk about my own company to a group of people who I'm trying to get them to buy in and get their interest.
Thanks. This is a great presentation. So when you talk about the script will sort of unfold as you're speaking because there's great energy when you're standing on stage and you've rehearsed it so many times. Are you talking then that it almost becomes a memorized script, almost word for word in many cases? Or are you saying, like the old-fashioned, get the cue cards where you just got these bullet points and you should be able to riff off of the bullet points? The second piece of that is, how do you, or what are your tips for having your teleprompter or whatever it is? Do you just have these high-level points, or do you have some phrases that you got to nail, so you better have them on your slide deck presentation?
Yeah, great question. So, I think when you think about memorization, obviously you want to have the most natural presentations are the ones that are almost entirely memorized. So, the more you can get to that point, the better. Now that said, different people have different levels of comfort with memorization, and so the most important thing is that you say all the things that you wanted to say. There's a couple different techniques that I've seen that can be very successful here. If you aren't able to kind of fully memorize everything line by line, some people use what I call a vicinity script, which says, roughly, here's what I want to talk about. If you're on a clock like you are at Finovate where you've got 7 minutes, I would recommend adding kind of timing to that. So you have these kind of key signposts. When I see 6 minutes left on the clock, I should be talking about this. When I see 5 minutes left on the clock, I should be talking about this. I don't necessarily need to have every single word on that page, but I do need to know from a timing standpoint, hey, you were supposed to be at this slide or this part of the demo by the time you had 4 minutes on the clock. You only have 3 minutes. Now you need to hustle. Now you're a little bit behind. And getting that kind of feedback in the middle of a presentation is really valuable because typically the most important piece is that conclusion. So if you know you're going to run out of time, cutting something else out kind of like middle to the back and making sure you save time for the conclusion is important. And when it comes to teleprompters and things like this, I'm a huge advocate of super low tech. I've seen people use, auto-scrolling kinds of software. One of the worst, most painful demos I ever saw in my life, and I'm not going to give you a company name so you can go look it up, but a guy had his own iPad with a demo script on there that was meant to start scrolling through so he could kind of use it as a teleprompter. That piece of technology failed. The piece of technology that he was demoing was fine, his messages were fine, but that simple iPad app that he had downloaded to do it set him up for a terrible time, and he didn't know it until he was 40 seconds into the demo and the page didn't move. And so all of a sudden, he was completely derailed, completely flustered a minute into his own demo. I always recommend note cards, a printed piece of paper. In some cases, if you've actually got a podium, maybe you have a vicinity script that you kind of just lay down on that podium. You can glance down and use it as much as you need to. If you've got a slide deck, your slide deck kind of helps keep you on point. You know how to present it. When you see the slide pop up in front of you, you know what you wanted to say about it. But in a situation where you don't have that luxury, being conscious of how much time you spent on each of these pieces is really important. So again, the more you can memorize it, the better. But if you can't quite get there, that's okay, as long as you give yourself either note cards or printed paper or something like that that lets you say, here's what I want to make sure I talk about. And adding those signposts, those timing signposts can be really helpful as well. Yeah, I see you have another one.
Hi, first, your presentation was inspirational, so like
Thank you.
got me excited. I'm gonna work on a pitch and really nail it down. And I have a quick question regarding about speaking speed. So I think a lot faster than, so when I improv. So like, yeah, so like, is there a particular speed that you should speak during presentations and pitches?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the most important things is just be conscious, first of all, of what your own speaking speed is. Knowing that about yourself is really important. And there are going to be times where different paces will be more appropriate than others. Now, again, you have to be yourself up there. So you want to talk at a speed that's natural for yourself. But at the same time, if you know that when you get nervous, you have a tendency to speed up, then you need to make a conscious effort to kind of slow it down. And here's again where those timing signposts can be really helpful. If I breeze through my first, what should have been a minute of presentation in 40 seconds, I need to take a deep breath. I need to just find a moment up on stage to collect myself and say, wait a minute, you're going too fast. You can slow this down a little bit. Another really important thing to consider is that you can use variations in pacing to draw attention to certain aspects of your presentation. For example, if I normally talk at this pace and I kind of have a running presentation at this pace, and then all of a sudden I stop and I slow something down, it's like bolding that text. It's amazing. It adds this huge amount of emphasis to it. And so when there are these big picture payoff sentences in your presentation, these kind of purple high-level messages, again, coming back to my super cool clip art there, when you have those really important messages, those high-level benefits, those are the messages that you have to make sure stand out. It's fine to talk at a little bit of a quicker pace as a general rule, but when you have those really important pieces, give them the time that they deserve. It's a good idea even to, in your own script, bold those sentences so that you see them coming as you practice it, and you can give them a little bit of space. That variation in timing can actually do a lot for you in terms of elevating that message and getting the audience to say, wait a minute, hold on, something's different, this must be important. These little tricks can be very helpful there. So when you have that big picture moment, give it the time and space it deserves. Aside from that, just make sure you can understand yourself, that people can understand you. One important thing to keep in mind, depending on where you are, if you're demonstrating or pitching to a group of people for whom English is not necessarily their first language, you want to make sure you're going a little bit slower. Well, you do if you want them to understand what you're saying anyway. This happens a lot for us. We pull in people from all over the world to our events, and even if you're in the United States for a US audience, there may be people in that room who you want to engage who are coming from somewhere else. And so in that case, slowing down your speaking speed is going to be a little bit more important.
When you're in presentations where it's not just like a demo with a strict time set and maybe like a Q&A or a panel, and there's just more room for improving and reading the audience, how do you think about preparing for those? Or maybe you're up there and you haven't had time to do the thorough prep. What do you think about preparing for those situations?
So those situations are difficult, and I would say as much as possible, you want to try and avoid being in that spot. You want to think about where, how much time you want to take. And if you know you've got an open-ended amount of time, you should be clear on how much time you think you want to take there. And if you say you can take between 30 and 45 minutes, then I might think, well, I'm going to go for 35 minutes with a 10-minute Q&A is going to be my goal. But this is where, again, having kind of a good understanding of the different messages, the different kind of segments of a presentation and how long those take, this is where that can be really helpful. If you have rehearsed a number of different segments, say you've got a 7-minute pitch, you got your bits for that, but there were some pieces that you cut out. Rehearse those pieces that you cut out in case you find yourself in a situation where you've got 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then you can, in the spur of the moment, you can say, you know what, I think this message would be good for the audience. I've got an extra 3 minutes here to be able to take. I'm going to add that element in. But it wouldn't be something that was off the cuff because you'd already practiced it. So it's a good idea to start rehearsing some of these pieces even before you have a specific speaking engagement, particularly in the venture capital space. Those meetings can come up on you really quickly, and you find yourself in a position where all of a sudden you've got somebody's attention, somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, come and talk to me tomorrow and see what you can show me. If you are already rehearsing pieces, if you have a good idea already of what your high-level messages are for that kind of group, then you can rely on that kind of that work that you've already done. So The high-level message here, I guess, is just start rehearsing, start practicing things before you even have a specific presentation, just like you would rehearse an elevator pitch, right? If you catch somebody at a cocktail hour and they say, hey, tell me what you do, you want to have 30 seconds in that moment. That's a polished, good 30 seconds. It's a good idea to have presentation elements as well that you can call on and say, I can jump to this piece. I see when I talk about X, the audience's eyes light up. Okay, I can give them a little bit more about X. I've got a 3-minute spiel that I can go through there, which sounds polished. And that way, you have the ability to kind of make the adjustment on the fly, but you're not ever getting outside of your comfort zone, and you're not going to end up in a position where you're struggling to find words to fill the time. You still know, I've still got my high-level message here. I know a good idea what my low-level message is going to be as well, so I can go ahead and jump into that on stage. But again, as you can tell, I'm a big believer in prep. The more prep that you can do for each speaking engagement, the better. It's not always possible, so good idea to rehearse some pieces ahead of time.
Thanks, Greg. This is fantastic. What tips or tricks do you have when people stall, when they have a brain freeze, and how can they get through it more easily?
That's a good question as well. So whatever your presentation is, it's a good idea to build in a parachute cord. Something that you can do if the worst happens, if you're a live demo and all of a sudden something freezes, giving yourself some kind of a backup plan is really helpful. And so there's a couple different things that you can do. In a live demo environment, it's a good idea to have a video, a locally stored video of that demo. So if something freezes, I can say, you know what, it's not working. Let me pull up this video, and I can walk you through this video that I already created. Having that ripcord is hugely valuable. And it's one of those things where the more prepared you are for that kind of eventuality, the less likely it is to happen to you. That's just sort of the way the world works. But certainly, it helps people sleep better the night before, knowing that if something bad happens, you've got a recourse for that. If you're up there and you have this element where you all of a sudden struggle to remember what you were going to say, you have this kind of brain freeze where I had something for this. The best thing that I can say is jump to your next foothold, right? The kind of, like we're talking about with the timing, you say, okay, I'm missing something here for 30 seconds. Let me skip ahead. Let me get to the next point at which I'm comfortable and I can get things going again. And once that happens, there's a good chance that once you start flowing again, that initial piece that you were struggling with will come back. You'll be able to kind of come back and touch on it again. But there's really no answer except find that next foothold, find that next place where you can say, maybe I have to miss something, I missed 30 seconds on this, but we'll pick it up at minute 2, and I'm comfortable from there so I can keep it going again. The big thing to remember in that situation is don't panic. The audience wants you to succeed. They want you to do well. They are rooting for you in that moment. Nobody wants to watch a demo implode or a pitch implode. The audience wants you to bring it back. And so if you find that comfort level, you find some place where you can come back into it, they'll be happy that you did. And I'm not going to say do it on purpose, but in many cases, it actually makes you a sympathetic figure in their eyes. They understand that pitching is not your day job, right? This is not the criteria on which you'll be judged. You'll be judged on the content, on the message, not the quality of the demo. So the best thing is just kind of find that point where you can jump right back into it.
So you mentioned that it's really important to grab your audience attention in the first 30 to 60 seconds. So what are some good ways of achieving that?
Yeah, so the honest answer is there's a lot. This is where you can start to add some more performative elements if you want to. If you want to start out with kind of like a attention-getting opening, you certainly can. I'm a big fan of just letting it be extremely simple in the introduction. And typically I would say, come out, introduce yourself, introduce your company, and right away, jump into those 3 things that I want you to know about me. So, hi, I'm Greg Palmer. I'm with Finovate. Finovate is the best place to come and see financial and banking technology demos. I can just jump right into it. In the first 10 seconds, you know who I am. You understand, do I want to watch fintech demos? I don't know, do you? Do you guys, who watches fintech demos? No, but you understand exactly who is up there on stage and what they're offering to you. And then after they have those high-level messages out there, I recommend giving a little bit of a kind of table of contents. Today I'm going to show you X, Y, and Z. Tell the audience what's coming. Give them an expectation. So what you've already done in your first 30 seconds is dangle this kind of value proposition in front of them. Here's what's in it for you if you pay attention. And here's what you can expect over the course of the next 7 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you have. And that gives me as an audience member the tools that I need to say, okay, I'll play with you. I'll come along with you on this journey. I'll listen to this message. And by creating that expectation, then the audience, everything you actually show the audience will be something that they're expecting. It makes it easier for them to actually absorb it. But right out of the gate, the first thing the audience wants to know is, do I need to care about this demo? Do I need to care about this presentation? And the only way you can get them to answer yes is if you give them that high-level value proposition, what's in it for you if you pay attention. I think we're at about 2 minutes left. Oh, we got time for one more probably? I don't know.
Great presentation, Greg.
Thank you.
I was observing your body language throughout prior to you mentioning body language, and I do notice that you do keep your feet in one stationary position. But the question that I do have is about eye contact. When you're giving a presentation to an audience, do you make eye contact with different individuals? Do you kind of overview of looking at the audience? Are you looking at the back of the room? Where do you recommend positioning eyes?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And this is, again, going to come down to different people have different answers to this question. It depends on where your comfort level is. Some people like to look at individual members of the audience. If you can see them kind of like, smiling and nodding, that can be reassuring, right? Yes, they're with me. For some people, they want to just pretend the audience doesn't exist, right? If you're a really nervous public speaker, I would say don't look at the audience in the eyes. Typically, what I recommend if you're on a stage like this, you can kind of look above the audience. Now, you might not even have noticed, there's a camera right back there. And if I look just above the audience's eye level, I'm actually staring right at the camera level. So I can think to myself, I'm right here. I can ignore all of you, and it looks like I'm paying attention to every single one of you. I can keep my head on a swivel at that camera level. I can go left, I can go right. I'm not looking at anybody right now, but I'm getting credit for looking at everybody. So if you are the kind of person who doesn't want to make eye contact with somebody, that's a really good technique. Look over the audience, never look down, always look up. If you can get your head up above the audience, and frequently, this is another little cheater trick, but there's usually exit signs at the back of the room. Give your demo to the exit signs if you want to pretend the audience isn't there. They're almost always at about eye level with the camera. They're a little bit higher, so I can, there's only one in here, but in a big auditorium like we have, you can just look at the right exit sign, look at the left exit sign. Again, ignore the audience 100% if you want to, and people will still think, wow, she's really making great eye contact with everybody, and they won't know that you're cheating, and it's terrific. I see that the clock is at 0. If you're interested in following up with me, I do demo coaching and pitch coaching for hire. You can email me, greg@finovate.com. I've seen so many excellent pitches in my life, but I've seen way too many terrible pitches. And if there's anything I can do to stop that from happening, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you all for having me, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Yeah.